evening and welcome to Meticulous Moments. My name is Juanita Kapp. You can reach me at meticulousmacarons@gmail.com or find me on LinkedIn. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the globe, I've had the wonderful privilege to meet a wide array of fantastic individuals. These individuals have truly touched my life in so many positive ways. Amongst this group of people, there are authors, public speakers, life coaches, poets, leaders, and visionaries. They are the unsung heroes of our time. Therefore, I decided to start the Meticulous Moments movement out of a sense of my gratitude. It is my way of giving back to the community. Let us share and reshare their stories in an effort to build a better society. Good evening, Meticulous Moments audience. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Meticulous Moments podcast, where we facilitate community upliftment through leadership development. Today, we have the wonderful privilege of spending time with the amazing Martin Brooker. Good day, Martin. How are you?
Yeah, Jay, it's good to be with you. Thank you.
I am so blessed to have you here with me in this session. Thank you so much for making the time. Here in South Africa, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I believe it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon where you are.
Yeah, that's right. Here on the east coast of Australia.
Amazing, amazing. It's wonderful how technology connects us. And we met on LinkedIn and we've conversed. We've had a virtual coffee. And I feel like I know you a little bit longer, So for the audience members that have not been acquainted with you, will you just introduce yourself, please?
So Martin Brooker, I am a veteran of 37 years plus service in the Royal Australian Navy, which just makes me a bit older. I left full-time service 7 years ago. My service in the Navy included operational service in the Middle East, Afghanistan and the Pacific. Had command of an amphibious ship, ran Navy's major change program, New Generation Navy, and also was the commander of the Mine Warfare and Cleveland's Diving Group as well as serving as the deputy commander of our forces in the Middle East and Afghanistan.
My goodness, that's amazing.
So left full-time service 7 years ago. I knew I didn't want to work for anybody else. But what I was passionate about was how do people turn up in leadership, and what does it take to be an effective leader? So, that's been my focus in the last sort of 7.5 years, of course, on top of all of that leadership focus that I had in the Navy.
My goodness, that is phenomenal. I'm thinking to myself, and I know the audience is thinking the same thing. We are definitely in wonderful leadership hands for this session. So I look very forward to hear what transpires as we go through the questions. Thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now, you were born in England. We had this discussion. I remember that you discussed this with me and informed me you were born in England and then you moved to Australia. And I really wanted to know if there are any differences that you experienced between these two countries and what they were.
Yeah. Well, I was 7 years old when I came to Australia. And I guess growing up in England in those days, back in the 70s, Australia was a long way away. It was a very long flight getting there, and got to the other end, and it was a completely new experience. I guess if I reflect, it's sort of Australia had beaches. It was more open. There was like a bigger sky. The sky was more blue than it was grey. That was the case in England. Moved to Sydney, which many people would know for its Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, and we moved to the northern beaches of Sydney, about 30 kilometres north of the city. And I say to people, I went to an area that was famous for surfing and rugby, and I was an English kid and I played soccer and I could hardly swim, so I was a bit odd, a bit of the odd one out, I suppose, in that environment. But what did happen is, I guess, I came to love this country for just the freedom that it has, the multicultural aspects, and the diversity of the people as well as the culture and the landscape as well. You know, you can go from mountains to the sea, from desert to lush green rainforests, from wetlands to drylands. So, you know, it's just a beautiful country that's got everything in it, I guess.
I love it. I love it. And I can just imagine what a breath of fresh air you were amongst everyone there, you know, just bringing in your originality and your new viewpoints. And you were talking about oceans, talking about mountains, talking about forests. And when you said that, it flickered something with me, because I'm from South Africa, and man, do we love beaches and mountains and forests. So I've heard only good things about Australia. I'm sure you are very happy there.
Yeah, look, it's wow, dare I say it? It's actually over 50 years now that I've lived here, and I wasn't. It wasn't until it was 30 something that I actually got to go back to England. And you know, look, I love England. I love Europe. I love being in England. But, you know, like the Peter Allen song, I still call Australia home now. And, you know, of course, I've got Australian children, Australian grandchildren as well.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing how that journey started for you. Everything happens in its time, and it happens for a reason. And I mean, if that had not happened, a lot of the things in your life wouldn't have transpired. So I always believe there's a higher hand.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I do think, you know, it was a defining moment when my father decided to, or my parents decided that moving to Australia was the go. And, you know, I honestly think I wouldn't have had the career in the Navy had I remained in England. So, yeah, I feel blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a plan. God orchestrated the plan. So, Martin, you're a salted leader. I mean, from the discussions that we had, I can see you're very disciplined. You know what you're doing. You have the experience. You have also the knowledge, which is very important. And, you know, if you look back to a defining moment, where did your leadership journey start?
I think the leadership journey started as a young teenager. And it was probably the example of my father, who had a great heart for service and the community. And he had grown up in pretty meagre conditions, I guess, in the East End of London. And he had people around him that had given him a step up and had been generous in his life and given him opportunities. And when we came to the Northern Beaches of Sydney, one couple of things that he got involved in were service clubs, but also involved in Scouts, Boy Scouts, as they were in the day. And so he was actively involved in those things. And I can remember his example in leading Scout groups and also leading the community as well through the service club. So, for example, every year one of the service clubs would, you know, what I'm talking about here is Rotary or Apex or Lions, those clubs. They ran an event for older people aged people in the community, older people in the community for Christmas. And as young boys, we were part of making that happen. You know, we would serve people, you know, this Christmas lunch in the community hall in the centre of town. We would be involved in going and picking them up in the cars with Dad or welcoming them when they got to the hall. And, you know, Dad would often be the one that played Santa. And it was just, and I remember from that, we actually adopted a grandma. We had an older lady in the local community. His family didn't live locally, and Dad's just heart was to go and invite her to come into her home on a regular basis. And you know, so it was that example and just, I guess, service. And so that really was that first example. And I think that translated into my own desire to want to serve and continue to serve as I do today.
Amazing, amazing. Your father is a phenomenal, you know, leader as well in his own right. He shaped you, he formed you. He gave you this heart of compassion, empathy, and you know, leadership, servant leadership.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I'm sure that set the stage for you when you eventually went, you know, into the Navy. And it's so wonderful to hear that testimony. So leaders,
absolutely.
parents are leaders. I said to someone last night when I had an interview with him, I said, because the interviewee is named Freeman Beals. And I said to him last night, he and his wife are expecting a baby. And I said, well, you must remember, leadership, being a parent, it is being a leader. And that
Yes.
little baby is going to soak up everything, like a sponge, and you and your wife will shape. And that also goes over into the teenage years. Now, I mentioned that I remember that you mentioned you were 15 and a half when you entered the Navy. Tell us about that,
Yes.
because you were a boy with a dream.
No, I was a boy with a dream. I was, as I said before, I didn't quite fit in being an English kid who couldn't surf and couldn't play rugby. And but the group of kids that I would hang around with at school, we all kind of came across the idea of wanting to fly. And a couple of my friends wanted to go and join the Australian Air Force to fly. And I thought, I want to do something different. I want to fly in the Navy. And there were a couple of television sort of documentaries and series on at that time that caught my interest. And I decided I wanted to fly and joined the Navy. And so my father went down that track and got the information to that. And, through the advice given at the recruiting centre, the encouragement was to just join the Navy and work out whether I wanted to fly when I got there. And the first way of entering the Navy was there right there in front of me, was to join at the age of 15 and a half to actually do my last 2 years of high school in the Navy and be paid for it. And, so at 15 and a half, went off to the Royal Australian Naval College, which is on the south coast of New South Wales, so south of Sydney, and in a beautiful part of the world. And there with, 120, 150 other young men sort of all aspiring to be naval officers. So it was a quite unique environment.
My goodness, when you mentioned the other individuals that joined you, the 150, I was thinking, can you imagine that energy and that excitement, that you all shared? Because when you're young and you're passionate about something, all your energy goes into that. So I'm sure you were just a lovely, lovely group of young men, individuals, I'd say.
Of course,
and,
definitely individuals. And look, some of those young men served for a very short period of time. Others are still serving. In fact, the vice chief of the Defence Force in Australia right now is a classmate of mine, and we joined the Navy actually 45 years ago next year in January. So. He's still serving. So, a lot of service from a lot of young men. I have fond reflections of that time, and it was a dream come true. And I realised, I think it's been there was always an assessment of where that career was, and was I being fulfilled in it. And I think that's an important thing for anybody who, in terms of self-leadership or leading others, is helping people when they're at those crossroads about what might be important to them. And, because at the end of the day, I want to get up in the morning and want to go to work to do the thing I'm doing, not feel like I'm just a conscript to the pay packet, so to speak.
Oh, yes, you said some very important things. Self-leadership, phenomenally important. That guidance during your career to find out where you are personally, professionally. Are you happy? I had a conversation with, I think it was John Cordell, and he was also talking about people being happy in their environment, wanting to go to work. Touched base with Roy Love on that. He's also a globetrotter, but he also, made history like yourself in the Navy. And I really feel you are a history maker. I see you going in there into the Navy at 15 and a half. You wanted to fly aircraft carriers, and by God's grace, you ended up being in the Navy for 37 and a half years. How does that feel when you look back and you realize you made it happen just by being dedicated?
Yeah. It kind of gives you goosebumps, I suppose. You wouldn't have imagined at 15 and a half that you were going to spend the next 37 years there. But, I think service is always a privilege. And I reflect on my career as a privilege, and
Beautiful.
to serve and lead other people, into harm's way. And, I had a number of key roles, and fortunate to have command of my own ship that, had operational service in a couple of places. And it was a quote actually from Theodore Roosevelt that really has been an inspiration in terms of my leadership, which is nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And it really is, I think the most important thing for me in that dream has been to recognize that I didn't get to all of that without building relationships with people and connecting with people and building an environment of trust between us. Because if you're just doing it for yourself, it will not be that much fun at the end of the day for you or for the people who are around you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And being a commodore of a ship, I mean, that takes a lot of leadership, self-leadership, leadership of others, to run that whole scenario. I mean, that must really take tenacity. And today you are a retired commodore with many stories to share. And that wisdom is there. And that wisdom, you can't buy it. You have to go through it. You have to experience life to get the wisdom that you have today. And I have a very important question, because the Meticulous Moments audience, I always let the guests, I always ask them to share that wisdom with the audience so that we can, as we rise, that we can live. And I want to ask you, what advice would you give young people who aspire to be in the Navy like you?
I think the advice would be, number one, be yourself. There's often a challenge in military service, in fact, in many organisations, where you feel like you've got to be something other than yourself to be successful. I think the most important thing you can do is to be yourself. And if you are knowing also that you're going to be tested and that it'll need some grit and courage to dig deep, to perhaps get through some stuff that might be quite challenging. I think you have to remember in terms of remembering to be yourself, is remembering what are your core values and ensuring that you stick to those as part of, whatever it is you're doing, whether it be military service or otherwise.
Wonderful answer. Wonderful, unique answer. I've never heard that perspective before. I love that. Leadership is something natural. And if you're real with yourself, you can be real with others. That's where I gather from it.
Yes.
And it takes a certain level of self-awareness to be a good leader. Knowing our own shortcomings, knowing our own strengths, and, making people feel comfortable. And you mentioned something very important earlier. You spoke about trust. And for me, leadership is about relationship building and trust. So I agree completely. Thank you so much for that lovely answer. Now, my next question. How do teammates on a ship keep their morale high? Because I know there are times that they go through the dips. That's life. We all go through it.
Yes. Yeah, look, it's really interesting. In a ship, you don't get to choose your teammates. The system that sends people to that particular ship is not considerate of the people that are already there. We're not like matching people up as such. And so the creation of, I guess, good team morale does come from leadership of the within the ship. So that it starts with the captain all the way down through the chain of command. And I think my goal was to ensure that people felt like they weren't just conscripts, but volunteers to that. And it starts with that sort of quote I might have said before about nobody cares how much you know until you know how much you care. Yeah. And I found that the best way to keep morale high was to make sure that you were open to the conversations, you were open to the feedback. and that they were honest conversations. I had a particular situation in my ship where we were deployed to the Solomon Islands, and we didn't actually know when we were going to get home. Now, you can imagine, it's a bit like COVID, to be honest. It was, we were there in the July. We didn't know when we were coming home. And you imagine in the next, from July to the end of the year, there would have been weddings, there would have been children to be born, there would have been other special occasions that people were supposed to go to, and not knowing whether you could actually get to those things or not. And the way that we kept morale high was helping people establish a good routine for themselves, creating an environment where people had time to be themselves as well. Physical exercise can help with that, having celebrations of certain things, making sure there's a sense of humour around what's going on rather than being so serious all the time. And I think morale in a ship comes from the leadership. It's about them being fully engaged. And the challenge is you're literally in the same boat. And you've got to perhaps get over your own challenge, emotional challenge, lead yourself to a point where you're actually outwardly caring about the people to show that actually they are important and you're not wrapped up in your own stuff. And I mean, I think it's also just being generous as well, giving people time off when it makes sense to do that. I had a boss once, a captain of a ship, and his motto was work hard and play hard, and just making sure that there's a balance between those two. We all will be able to surge into work, but we also need time to play as well.
We do. We are made up that way so that our mental health can be in a good place, because we need that shift. And you were speaking about being generous, and I thought to myself, what really shines through from you as well, Martin, that I perceive, because I know you are in Australia and I'm in South Africa, but there is an energy that we share, and we share this love for leadership. Is that, the generosity that you had with your staff, but also that genuine heart, for their general well-being. And I was thinking as you were speaking, God always speaks to me in pictures, and I was thinking to myself, here you are the commodore of the ship. That's a heavy responsibility. That's a cloak that you were wearing. And it took a lot of, being disciplined within yourself, staying positive yourself, to let that really cipher through to the rest of the crew. So, I mean, I commend you on what you've done for others in the Navy. Can you imagine, think about this. There's so many people that you've led over the years that are now equipped and experienced to lead others. And that's because you were there at that time. It's amazing.
Yeah. And look, I've had the opportunity to meet many of those people since. And there's often a reflection, not about necessarily the job, not necessarily about the mission, but actually about the conversations that we had. Sir, I remember when you asked me about this, or I remember you asking me about the birthday present I bought for my son, or something like that. Those things make the difference. I was also, just as you were talking, I was thinking, most importantly, if you are the chief executive officer, the captain of the ship, so to speak, it's who do you have around you that can support you? And the people that I had in the ship were great. There were a couple of key members of my immediate sort of heads of department. The chaplain on the ship was somebody that I had a meeting with every week in the privacy over a cup of tea or coffee after church on a Sunday. And we would just talk about stuff, and it was my opportunity to kind of let down my guard and to talk about what was going on for me. You got to do those things to make sure you look after yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Loving that flow that I see, loving that synchronicity between all the members, taking them on that vessel and just creating that family feel. We work, but we also play, and you're not just here as a member of the ship to be a worker. You are valued. You're a leader in your own right. We know you have a family. We care. We know you have a wife and a child. How are they? That was the secret sauce, I'd say,
That was what made it so special for them. And that's why they remember you, because you invested your time and your effort in it. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure. It's an honor, really an honor to have you here today. Now, I remember you mentioning you love good food, you love wine, sports, sailing, and motorbikes. Now, I love all of the above, but I've never been sailing. So tell us more about these activities that you enjoy with your partner, Jacqueline.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll package them up, I guess. I'm fascinated. Actually, food and cooking has been one of my forms of relaxation. It's almost a meditation. And so I have loved creating good food for sharing around a table with friends and family. And, you know, that's often involved. Actually, I've been to restaurants where I've had a dish and I go, what would it take to make that? And I've kind of worked it out, sort of often deconstructed what might be in that recipe and reconstructed it that. You know, so those are kind of things. And I think being in Australia, you know, where wine is a great export of this country as well as consumed in the domestic market. I grew an appreciation for wine. So, in moderation, that wine definitely goes with that food around the table. The other thing about sports, I guess, is Australia, you know, is a proud sporting nation, just like South Africa, actually. And, you know, sport is part of Australian culture. And I think the thing that attracts me to that is to see how either individually or as a group of people in a team, people can be better, how they can improve, you know, how do they manage that adversity? And, you know, whether it be watching a tennis match or a rugby game, how as a group of people are they able to lift and work together to get a better outcome? You know, which I think is part of that human endeavor, human spirit. How can I, you know, after defeat, how can I do better?
Beautiful.
And sailing and motorbikes, well, they're in two different environments, but in some ways they're the kind of, provide a similar space because both of them are where you need to look after yourself, and it's just you and either the boat in the water or you and the motorbike in the road. And I've found that both of those environments have been a place where I can participate, and it's actually thinking time. You know, when you're on a motorbike riding the road, the only thing you've got in focus really is looking after yourself to make sure that you safely. Once you've got that covered, you can enjoy the environment and you know, just get away from sort of the hustle and bustle. Sailing's the same, particularly at night. You know, sailing up the coast of Australia.
Wow.
You know, in the middle of the night there, and it's just you, the boat, and people sleeping below.
Amazing.
Take responsibility for that, but also just sort of, again, taking responsibility for yourself and for the people that are around you.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I've seen the sailing, you know, in the night, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so scared of sharks. But I'm sure it's safe. Well,
I've not been scared of sharks. I've been more scared of being seasick, to be honest. And people often laugh, you know, when I tell them you spent 37 plus years in the Navy and you sail as well, and you got seasick, like, you know, but I've never really gotten over it. What I do know is that there are some really good drugs that can help deal with that.
Wonderful. I did not know that. That's very, very interesting. And you were speaking about the wine, and I was thinking, here in South Africa, we're also very big on wine. We love a good glass of wine with a meal. And I can relate with you about the motorbike. I've also gone skydiving, and what I love about that, and you'll know when you're on that bike and you are going so fast on the highway, you just hear the wind. And it's just you and the wind, and you are all here in your own mind. And it's the same with skydiving. It's just you and the wind. No cell phone devices, no people around you. It's just you and nature. And I love that. Thank you for telling me about that. I might just go and try sailing, but maybe at first not at night, maybe in the daytime.
Good idea. Yeah, and in some calmer conditions. Yeah.
Yes. So we both are believers, Martin, and we had a lovely discussion about the Pentecostal church. I would love to hear your experience with the Pentecostal church.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Anglican Church, or the Church of England, originally, and I made a commitment in faith, as a teenager. But along the way, there was, I was diverted, and some different things happened. But what I found is that I'd got to a point 3 years ago, I guess, where I actually recognised that I had personally run out of resources, and that I needed to reconnect with church and reconnect with God in a way that perhaps I hadn't done before. And with Jacqueline, we started to look at churches where we were, and we both had grown up, I guess, in traditional mainstream churches, not the Pentecostal isn't, but more the traditional ones, I guess, of Baptist or Anglican Church, whatever, and Catholic Church, for example. And I wanted something that actually was more, I guess, about my relationship, but also that had some right guidance in terms of what that real faith journey would look like and what that relationship would look like. And my experience has been that a Pentecostal church gives a real opportunity for you to recognise how you can be reborn in that commitment. And I think what I found is that that environment has seen continual growth. It's an environment where I've always felt like I've been growing. There's always been something on my heart, and I think I've probably done more to discover what gifts I have from God in that process. So, yeah, that's my experience.
I love that. I relate to everything that you say there. I've had a similar experience, and it's just amazing when you go into that relationship with the Lord and you have that leadership that He brings. You're aware of Him, and He guides you and He leads you. It's just a phenomenal feeling. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's all right.
Now, your favorite leadership book, I'm very interested to know, because, you have been a leader for a very long time. What is your favorite leadership book?
Look, there are a lot of books behind me here. The one I think that the one that I think stands out and has stood the test of time would have to be 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
But I'm always interested in what else is out there. I don't think there's not much new in leadership in my mind. What is new is actually how do people finding better ways for people to relate. And I think if I look at the foundations of a growth mindset, Covey's book kind of gives you that in terms of those effective, habits of effective people.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Those principles that are brought to the fore are really running in every arena of life. So I also love that. I'm going to say that to us, I think that would be a timeless classic. It's a go-to. It's part of our foundation of leadership. So if there's anyone in the audience that have not read it, read that book, because it will give you the building blocks you need for the other books that are out there that will start to piece everything together for you. That is a phenomenal book. I'm acquainted with that one. Good answer. I love it. Now, your favorite leadership quote, because I know there's so many leadership quotes out there. What's your favorite leadership quote?
Well, I've given it to you already about the sort of from Theodore Roosevelt that nobody cares how much you know and to learn how much you care. I guess I have a quote in my that I came across that I formulated, I guess, in my business. So look, given I've given you one already, I'll give you mine, which is actually it doesn't matter whether the glass is half full or half empty. It's about whether it quenches your thirst.
Oh,
and
amazing.
So I think, in terms of leadership, where you are, self-leadership, it's definitely about am I doing the thing that actually gets me up in the morning?
Yeah.
Is it the thing that satisfies my thirst for being myself? And so, yeah, that's my quote.
My goodness, that's an amazing one. I'm going to remember that. It's not because it's not about being half full, the glass being half full or half empty. It's about whether it quenches your thirst.
Yes.
You see, you have a whole leadership arsenal already built up there, Martin. It's like going to Martin Brooker's library of leadership wisdom and quotes. I love it.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So tell me, I know you are, still very active in working with people, leading the people that you meet, and that, of course, when you decided long ago, those years, that you are going to be a leader, you committed to a life of lifelong learning and development. So how now, after, looking back and being in this wonderful space that you are, how often do you engage in personal and professional development?
Yeah. Well, look, I think that, it all fits into that growth mindset, and it's about resources. Look, I'm a big consumer of podcasts, audible books, or even reading a book. I've actually this year committed myself to an internship program in my church. Now, the internship program is usually for people who've just finished high school looking for something in a gap year. But I thought, you know what, having come back to church and God, I thought, I'm just going to throw myself into this. I felt led to do it, and that's been a couple of times a week commitment. And the real benefit of that has been humbling myself to learn from not only others, but others who are young than you by a mile.
Interesting.
I have loved the experience of sitting around with 18, 19, 20-year-olds and hearing their perspective on matters of leadership and what they see in the world. So that's been powerful. It ends this next week, but it is about, so what do I do next, I guess? And it's about looking for those other things that continue to do that. I continue to learn. The workshops I deliver, the executive coaching that I deliver, even speaking, all of them provide an opportunity for learning when you connect with people. And, I'm constantly learning from the people in those workshops and those people that are in front of me in an audience. So, yeah, it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon.
I don't foresee it ever stopping. I can see you are busy honing your leadership skills and imparting that knowledge and that wisdom to the younger generation who need it, especially after COVID. Because that's the whole reason I started Meticulous Moments. I saw there was this gap, and it's always been there, and COVID made it a bit bigger for us. And I'm so happy to hear in my heart that you are actively busy in the church, working with these youngsters, instilling these principles in their lives. And, it's a give and take, a learning process. So enjoy that. I believe God placed you there for such a time as this. And, of course, His anointing is on you. So we'll be cheering you on in that. Absolutely.
Thanks, Jay.
So tell me, what's next for you?
Oh, look, I think I'm looking for a break, actually, over Christmas. But, look, I started the start of the Frontline to Boardroom podcast this year, and we've put down 20 episodes. There will be more episodes to come. I've got a couple of projects around a new leadership workshop that I'm delivering. Looking to continue to speak at, on main stages as well. But the thing that's probably got my attention also in amongst all that is men and how they turn up to be better husbands, fathers, and men in the community. And I believe there's some work to be done in that space to help men show up better in their lives. And so I'm exploring that right now. And I expect to see more of that come to the fore in next year.
Amazing. I agree. It's been a long year. It's time for a break. And I can just see, you going into 2023 on this wonderful leadership high, looking back over everything that you've done, riding that new wave as you would go sailing. And I'm going to pray for your podcast and all your projects and the products. You never know, there might be products that come from it. But I really love your focus, and that's on the men. And that is very important. I've spoken to a lot of people recently who said that they've identified that gap. And I'm so thankful that someone is doing something about it. So thank you for taking up that baton and for running with it and for making society a better place. We need our men to also be happy and fulfilled. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, our time together has absolutely just flown by. I mean, our hour is over. We're down to our last question. I can't believe it. They do say, time flies when you're having fun. So I'm here at my last question, unbelievably so. And that is, do you have any words of wisdom that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah. Look, I think it's probably comes from a lesson that I think I've learnt and relearnt. And it has to do with, I guess, that self-awareness. When something's not going quite the way you thought it would, whether it be a relationship, a work scenario, or your personal life, it will have to do with integrity. And what I mean by that is the integrity that you have with yourself at a core level. What are those core values that are important to you that you were born with effectively? And if there's a challenge or a struggle or a broken relationship, it will probably be because you are out of integrity with who you are at a core. And I think that's something we've got to pay attention to and understanding ourselves enough to know what it means to be in integrity with ourselves. And if you are a believer, then it will often be my integrity with God as well. And, I think that's really important. And I can think back to, different times in my life where things were not as good as I wanted them to be, whether it be personally or professionally. And it was because something was out of alignment and it was doing the work to get back into alignment. And I think that's when you do that, you do find that joy in life when you actually are in integrity with yourself. So, that's me. That's me.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And something came across to me in our session. And that is that you're not only a good communicator, you are an excellent communicator and you communicate effectively. And through that communication, that effective communication, you use that as a vehicle to give your authenticity to the world, to show the world your integrity, and just to spread the magic that is Martin Brooker. Because you love God, you love people, and you want to make a positive difference in society. And here at Meticulous Moments, we want to facilitate community upliftment through leadership development. And I thank you for taking the time to spend this afternoon, your afternoon and my morning with the audience, and just for brightening up our day. Thank you so much, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks for having me as a guest.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have to do a sequel at some point. We'll still talk about that after we all have our end of year break. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. You know what to do. I'm going to make Martin's contact details and his social media handles available at the end of the session. Follow him, cheer him on, network with him, and let's all take hands and make the world a better place. With that, we'll see you in the next session. Goodbye.